right now it's still morning. So good morning and welcome today to this webinar, which is the fifth in its series, and which is organized by STELAP, which is the Coalition of European Lobbies for Eastern African Pastoralism. STELAP is an informal coalition of European members and partners working on lobbying, communication, and knowledge sharing in the field of pastoralism in Africa. My name is Pastoralist. I work for Transhumance in Belgium as an advocacy manager. ESFB has been European focal point of STELAP since 2013.
We don't hear you well. Your volume.
Excuse me? You don't hear me well?
You may want to start again. We don't hear you at all.
Do you hear me now? I don't know what happened.
There's no audio.
Wait.
It was earlier on. It was okay.
And now it's. Do you hear me now?
We hear you. You may want to start again.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
So these things happen, right? So I was welcoming everyone. So welcome to today's webinar, which is organized by STELAP. STELAP is a coalition of European lobbies for Eastern African pastoralism. Today's webinar is the fifth in its series, and it's organized by STELAP, which is an informal coalition of European members and Eastern African partners working on lobbying, communication, and knowledge sharing in the field of pastoralism in Eastern Africa. So I was presenting myself earlier when I was muted. My name is Koen van Troos, and I work for Vétérinaires Sans Frontières Belgium as an advocacy manager, and our organization has been European focal point since 2013. Today's webinar is actually hosted by SNV Netherlands under the Voice for Change partnership. And we are happy to welcome you today on behalf of SNV and on behalf of STELAP. The webinar is entitled Towards an Enabling Policy Environment for African Pastoralists, and the aim is to create a better understanding of policy frameworks concerning pastoralism at IGAD, ECOWAS, and AU level. And the exchange today will focus on underlying challenges related to the setup of these frameworks, the endorsement and implementation within national policies. Now, before I go any further, I'd be happy to give the floor to my colleague Mary.
Je vais donner en fait la parole à mon collègue Marie. Je vais donner la parole à mon collègue Marie d'abord.
Sorry, I think there's an interpretation issue. Mary, please, if you want to introduce the Voice for Change partnership and SNV, go ahead.
Thank you, Koen.
Oui. Merci.
Really welcoming everybody to this webinar. On behalf of SNV, Voice for Change Partnership, we are happy to join with STELAP in sharing this moment. Voice for Change Partnership is an evidence-based advocacy project implemented over the last 6 years in 6 countries. And one of the topics that we have looked at is pastoralism. In Kenya and Burkina Faso, we were looking at building capacity of civil society organizations to advocate for enabling environment for pastoralist voice. So we were looking at strengthening the voice of pastoralism, and the core agenda was their resilience for within the context of climate change. So we've been able to work with over 51 civil society organizations. And in regard to the pastoralism agenda, we've been able to influence policies at national level and at subnational level in Kenya and Burkina Faso on issues related to livestock marketing, especially for economic resilience, and on issues of climate change policy frameworks. Civil society organizations have been able to realize particular results. They've been able to engage governments, and they've been able to see some critical results. One of the underlying concerns is the fact that owing to nomadism and movement by pastoralists. It is extremely important to have overarching policy guidelines, either at regional or Pan-African level. And that's the reason that we think today's conversation on transhumance protocols is important. Civil society needs to know how they can engage at this level, at Pan-African level or East African level. And they also need to know one another and to know how to relate to these instruments. So we are quite happy to hear the inputs from IGAD, the inputs from ECOWAS and African Union, so that we can be able to know how to interact with these particular instruments. So welcome to the session. There'll be space at the end for you to engage with questions. So feel free to interact. Thanks, Kun.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you also for this interesting information on the Voice for Change partnership. I'm sure people can also contact you if they would like to have more information. I want to also introduce several speakers for today.
Introduire donc les différentes priorités de la journée. Je voudrais introduire les différentes. Est-ce qu'on can technician reassign me? Like I was off. Can the technician reassign me?
Yes. Sorry, there's an issue with
can the support team reassign me as interpreter? Yeah. Yeah. Can the support team reassign me as interpreter because there was I was off because of the internet?
Okay, Mamadou. Let's. We are doing that.
Is it okay now?
I'm still waiting.
Okay, let's wait for that. Meanwhile, it would be interesting for the participants, of course, to know that there's French translation being provided throughout the webinar. I will mostly speak in English. Please, Mamadou, can you give a sign when the interpretation is sorted? Is it okay now? Is the interpretation okay? Could you please confirm? Okay. All right, then I'll go on. So without further ado, I want to introduce the different speakers we have today. So first up, we will have Mr. Mamadou Koutou, who is working as a senior research and program officer at the African Union's Semi-Arid Food Grain Research and Development Bureau, and who's based in Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso. Then we will have Mr. Jafet Kassimbu, who is working as a transhumance expert at the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development, ICPALT, and who's based in Nairobi, Kenya. Afterwards, if all goes well, because he hasn't joined so far, we will have Dr. Bio Goure-Soulé, who's working as a technical assistant on livestock and pastoralism at the Agriculture, Environment and Water Resources Department of the ECOWAS Commission. And then we will have Mr. Michael Ochengo Diambo, who's Director of People, Land and Rural Development in Kenya, and who will present his insights regarding the different policy framework from an external point of view. Each speaker will give a presentation of about 7 minutes before we open the floor to questions from the participants. Please note that we are having this webinar in meeting mode, which is easier for you to also know who else is joining. But please keep your micro on mute unless you want to ask a question during the Q&A session, which will follow the presentations. Please note that the chat is also on and that you can also use it to, to present yourself, who you are, and engage with the other participants. Now, without further ado, I will pass the floor to Mr. Mamadou Koutou. So Mamadou, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. Good morning or good afternoon, depending to your respective time zone. Like the moderator just said, I'm Mamadou Koutou. I'm Program and Research Officer at the African Union office called AU SAFRAD, which is one of the specialized technical office under the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission. And we are based in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso. So the mandate of the office, SAFRAD, is basically trying to build the resilience of the people living in the semi-arid zone of Africa, which cover most of the thematic, including the pastoralism portfolio. We are very delighted at the African Union Commission to be part of this important webinar entitled Tour Enabling Policy Environment for African Pastoralism. And we are really grateful to the organizers for this opportunity given to us to share, to participate to this experience sharing event. So by saying this, I'm also excited to present the AU framework on pastoralism, more particularly on the 10 years of its implementation, focusing on the achievement and the pitfall. Let me try to share my presentation from now. My presentation will cover basically 4 main points. First of all, I will give a background, a little background in the context of the AU policy framework on pastoralism. And after that, I'll give some the objectives and the strategies that are been identified by this particular framework. And thirdly, I'll talk a little bit about the status of the policy, including the AU policy and also some laws, pastoral related laws in sub-Saharan Africa. And finally, I will just give some of the achievements, the challenges in the way of implementation of this framework, and a couple of key messages at the end. So as a background, I would say that the Executive Council of the African Union in January 2011 has approved the policy framework that basically aimed at securing, protecting, and securing, protecting, and improving the lives, the livelihood, and right of the pastoral community in Africa. It also emphasizes the need to fully involve pastoral women and men in the national and regional development process from which they used to be benefiting from. It also emphasizes the regional nature of the pastoralist ecosystem in Africa, and therefore the need to support and harmonize policy across the regional economic community and also the member states as well. The increase in human pressure, natural resources, and also the questioning of natural use, pastoral use of some strategic resources, specifically land and water, has created some dramatic conflict in some part of the continent. But following the advocacy activity undertaken by many national, regional, and international organizations, the problem of rehabilitating the pastoral farming system and equal access to water are now included in most of the agenda, both at national level and international or regional level. For instance, in Mauritania, countries like Mauritania, Burkina Faso, Mali, they have put in place a very good legislative tools specific to pastoralism. Because the pastoralism also spans across the border of the nation. And this character of being a cross-border and regional dimension necessitates to harmonize policies that affect all aspects of the pastoralism. And therefore, create the need to have a regional approach, cooperation and implementation of the cross-border initiative. So those initiatives include like regional trade, promotion of peace and security, animal health, development of infrastructure to strengthen the pastoral resilience in general. As an example, I'm putting here the IGAD protocol on transhuman that will be probably developed by the colleague from IGAD. And also the SEALs in West Africa is doing some great, putting some great initiative on the table to be able to strengthen the pastoralist activity in the region. So coming to the context itself of the framework, the commitment to the policy framework for pastoralism in Africa arises from the need for a continental platform to effectively address in a holistic manner the many challenges faced by pastoral community in Africa. It also arises from the need to facilitate the development and implementation of pastoral policy that could contribute to securing and also contributing, securing and protecting the livelihood of and the right of pastoral people. Now, I'm going to just briefly present the framework itself. Here, I'm going to just give a short of highlight of the framework. So, although the framework elaborates more on conceptualizing the African pastoralism, both in terms of geographical and economical context, it also reflects on the political context describing the colonial legacy, the post-colonial policy environment toward the current situation and development challenges. The core section of this framework I'm presenting in this slide turns around the two objectives and seven strategies around each of those objectives. So the first objective states to secure and protect the lives, livelihood, right of pastoral people and ensure continent-wide commitment to political, social, and economic development of pastoral community and pastoral area. It has identified 7 different strategies. And the second objective, to strengthen the contribution of pastoral livestock to national, regional, and continental wide economies. Here you have 2 interrelated objectives. The first one to focus on the right of the pastoral people, and second one to make sure that the economy of those pastoral also will contribute to the economy of the country and also to the region in general. As I said, each of those objectives are 7 strategies that are highlighted here. I'm not going to go through each of them specifically. Coming to the status of policies and laws on pastoralism in Sub-Saharan Africa, like I just mentioned, at Pan-African level, the framework of pastoralism has emerged following a process that started in 2006, and the framework has been endorsed by the Executive Council in 2011. It gives a broad guidelines on how we are going to promote the practice of pastoralism on the continent. At the regional level, a policy that also targeting pastoralism differ depending on the geographical area. I mentioned here the ECOWAS and IGAD leading on those specific aspects because they get to the point where the legislation has been taken on board to make sure that the pastoral is practiced in very smooth manner. Some regional economic communities like ICAS, UMA, and COMESA have now put in place some projects specific to pastoralism. And the issue is now to push those recs as well to reach the status of ECOWAS and IGAD. And African Union has to work to do on this specific issue. The Sahel region has progressively availed itself of legislative tools and policies that are very favorable to pastoralism than the one in East Africa. For instance, in Ethiopia and Uganda, the policies there tend to favor the sedentarization of the pastoralists. We need to work more on some of those policies. At the national level, pastoral laws and codes exist in countries like Guinea, Mauritania, Senegal, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And we have also noted some bilateral agreement among some of those countries. Now, on the achievement in the implementation of the AU framework, at the African Union level, implementation plan has been designed and the program and activity are monitored against this plan. In those few slides, I'm just mentioning some of the program reflecting the achievement so far. While I was presenting the framework in brief, I also present briefly the strategies that has captured in the strategy. So I'm not going to go through the specific strategy, but I'm giving here some of the brief of the implementation status. For example, to recognize the role of pastoralism in development, we have some projects in member states, some projects related to this, to strengthen the capacity of pastoral association to participate in policy formulation. And we have also draft what we call the continental institutional framework for the implementation of the framework. And also we have draft a resource mobilization strategy. This has to be discussed with the member state to make sure that those strategies have been taken aboard when it's coming to the national planning. For integrating the pastoral issues into decision-making process, we've gone through the establishment and strengthening the pastoral community-based organization network, both at national and also regional level in some member states. We also developed a strategy for supporting the pastoral group and network in establishing pastoral forum. Those are something we are still working on now. It is in progress now. We also try to make sure that we have kind of harmonization and elimination of cross-border barrier on utilization of indigenous pastoral community and some of the resources. We also organize very frequently the conflict resolution workshop to make sure that the stakeholder involved in the pastoral community can communicate and dialogue among themselves. In the same way, in terms of mainstreaming the pastoral issues in poverty reduction program, we work on adoption and strengthening the safety net program in all pastoral area of the member state, which are supported by some of the development partner. At African Union level, we also work on a framework, a specific framework on rural infrastructure to provide basic infrastructure need of the rural people, mostly for the pastoral community. Those are some of the implementation. I'm not really want to go for the interest of time, but I'm just putting some of those important achievements here. Looking at the mobility between member states, we put in place some legislation and policy on pastoral mobility among the member states at regional and also at national level. Some transboundary livestock agreement being discussed among the RECs. And we have also the ratification and domestication of the EU framework and guidelines for land policy. Africa has put in place what we call the land policy in Africa by member state. When we talk about the land, it directly link it to the practice of the pastoralism in Africa. Now, coming to the challenges in the implementation of the strategy, those challenges are at different levels. We have some challenges that can be solved at the national level, and some of them have to be looked at the regional or continental level. So I try to characterize them in terms of the level of intervention. Regarding the regional and continental level, we need to policy harmonization among countries, and among countries and also among the regions. And we also notice that as the challenges, the conflict and terrorism in Sahel region are kind of putting the pastoralists in difficult situation in this specific time. And the issues of the infrastructure, market, roads, etc., are some of those challenges in the region. At the national level, we can notice there are too many inconsistent policies and framework. In the same country, we can have different policies, and those policies are not really consistent among others. When we talk about the policy dialogue, you found that some of the policies are really talking to each other. We have also some weak and no link between the investment plan, the national investment plan, and the pastoralist policies at the national level. We have the plan where the rural, the people on the rural thematic are discussed in the national plan to make sure that they put the necessary resources for the people. But the pastoralists at the time are excluded from those discussions. And we have those common challenges, lack of capacity for the pastoral community, the issues of the financing, and also the issues of monitoring and the monitoring system to make sure that we get the right data to inform the policy. So I have two key messages to bring on board here. The first one, to take the opportunity of the operationalization of the African free trade area, which that has been come recently on board. We think that the Africa free trade area is the great opportunity for the pastoralism to really, take this opportunity and make sure that we have the free movement between the countries and also between the different regions of Africa. And the second key measure is really to strengthen the strong mechanism for monitoring and data collection to inform the right policy in the continent. Mr. Moderator, I think I come to the end of my presentation. I want to thank you. Merci beaucoup pour votre attention. Obrigada et shukran. Back to you, Moderator.
Thank you. Is it working now? No. Do you hear me now? Is it working?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mamadou, for this interesting presentation. It was really interesting to hear your views on the AU framework, the policy framework, and especially also the challenges that still lie ahead in terms of implementation and endorsement. I was also happy to see in your presentation that you are also confirming that ECOWAS and IGAD are taking the lead on developing regional policy frameworks, which also confirms the two different next speakers we have lined up. So without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to our next speaker, which is Mr. Jafet Kasimbu, who is working as a transhumance expert at the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development, IGPALT, and is based in Nairobi, Kenya. So just if you already have questions now, please keep them for the Q&A session. And you will have plenty of time to ask them. So, Jafet, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Brother Kun, and also it was a great pleasure to hear Mamadou from the African Union South Branch. He's always very informative and guiding us as Rex on what to do on these issues. They provide the overarching continental policy framework. We'll be sharing about the status of the transhumance protocol in the IGAD region and the next steps anticipated. I hope that the person sharing on the screen, would you please enable editing and make it a screen format, a full PowerPoint presentation, then we can move. Let's go to the next page, please. And are we there? Next page, please. Anyway, let me just continue. He will catch up. So as you know, we're discussing about the protocol that IGAD is pursuing and ensuring that we have it in the next few months, and also implementable in the IGAD member states. IGAD comprises about 7 member states because are you there? Yes, thank you. Thank you. So IGAD comprises 7 member states in the Horn of Africa and Eastern Africa, and that is Djibouti, Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and Uganda. Very soon we may be joined also by the Eritrea. Eritrea is also a member of IGAD, though the membership was suspended some time ago. The economic mainstream of this region is agriculture, both crop production and livestock. And therefore, the region, we say that in the Africa, from the information from African Union, is that 40% of the land is semi-arid and arid. In the region of Horn of Africa, we have 70% being ASAL. And that means we get very little rainfall in this region. The biggest part of the region is the one which we can only have pastoralism as the main economic activity. Next, we started discussing about the issues of the regional policy framework covering the issues of pastoralism and transhumance some times ago. And what informed this discussion? We carried out a preliminary assessment on pastoral mobility in the Horn of Africa in 2014. And we were looking at what exists, what are the problems they're going through, because within IGAD, we have what we call the IGAD Center for Pastoral Areas and Livestock Development. This was established by the member states in 2012 to take care of the issues within the pastoral regions, appreciating that the whole of the region has a big percentage of the land mass covering the arid and semi-arid, which is predominantly occupied by the pastoral communities. Now, during the time we carried out this assessment, part of the recommendations which came out of this assessment were that we needed a framework, a normative framework or a binding framework. And it was a feeling of the member states that we needed a free movement regime for pastoral communities and a framework that covers the free mobility for the pastoral communities to access water and also other services, including pasture, veterinary services within the region, but also in the member states across the other countries. And so the recommendations included coming up with an all-inclusive framework and also putting it in bilateral agreements and arrangements between the member states. It was also recommended we come up with national pastoral legislations and harmonize the policies so that the mobility across and also looking at support to pastoral regions can be enhanced from the central governments. And so all those recommendations led to us coming and starting pursuing a regional framework, which was the binding. This is how we started discussing coming up with a protocol on the free movement of transhumans within the IGAD region. So the journey started, and we came up with a protocol. We designed the protocol draft, which we shared with the member state. We can go to the next slide. And that, next please. And that protocol was looking at ensuring we have orderly movement of livestock and the herders through secured transhumance corridors in the grazing zones. And this was going to contribute towards having increased livestock productivity. The second objective was to ensure that we also have access to social services and the basic services such as education, health, by the herders themselves, the pastoralists who are moving to the neighboring countries, and avoid the conflicts between the pastoral communities. And thirdly was to ensure that we have harmonization of the national pastoral laws and the responses, you know, and look at improved surveillance and health matters. So what did we do? I think we need to move next. The journey started by, please move next. I think on that page you already cleared. So we started the journey in 2017 by engaging what we would call the technical national consultations in our member states. And they started, you would see that in August, we started the consultations with the stakeholders in Uganda. We went from Uganda, we went to Djibouti, you know, we proceeded to Somalia, Sudan, South Sudan, all the member states, and we've wound up with Kenya to conduct these national consultations and get their input, get their feel. And then from there, the second step, we can move to the next. We came up with a regional agreed upon protocol, which was consultative enough and which factored in the participation of all the member states. Next, please. The following here, we engage the legal experts in these member states to ensure that our protocol did not have flaws and did not conflict a lot with the most of the policies that needed to guide us in terms of ratification and implementation. And so we went back to the member states with a harmonized protocol with the technical input, and we subjected it to legal review by the legal policy experts. And we went through from May 2018 up to sometimes in 2019, that was July 2019. Then we completed the process, and now we went to the next level. Please let's move to the next slide. Before we moved to negotiations, we discussed a possibility of having a benchmarking mission to see what the other region which has gone ahead of us. And that was, we know that in the ECOWAS region has what we call in the ECOWAS protocol transhumance, but also a lot of implementation of it being done through also SEALs. So we discussed to have a visit to SEALs, and we had a mission to SEALs with the member states so they could be also exposed to what was happening. And we picked the Burkina Faso as the country. We visited the SEALs headquarters. We went to regions of ADA. We had exchanges and looked at the challenges they were facing in implementing the protocol in that region, and also what were the opportunities lying. It was after that we came and embarked on the negotiations with the member states on the protocol. Let's move fast to the next slide. The first round of negotiation meeting was in Entebbe, and that was in September 2019, that is last year. And because the protocol contains 32 articles, some 4 articles were contentious among some member states. So that meeting, which had the legal experts and also the ambassadors from the 7 member states, we approved the 28 out of the 2 articles. And that was the results or the achievement of that first round of negotiations. Those who have been involved in these negotiations, they know it can take long. Sometimes you have contentions on even a single article, which may take more than several months. Then next, we had a round 2 negotiation meeting in Khartoum, and that was in February this year. And move to the next slide. And then the good news is that this finalized all the issues which were contentious, and the whole protocol was fully, validated by the experts and endorsed by the IGAD Committee of Ambassadors. Now, IGAD has 3 policy organs. The first organ is the Committee of Ambassadors, which after approval of any document from there, is taken up to the second level, which is the IGAD Council of Ministers of Foreign Affairs, and that is where they do the signatories. So, and after that, it is presented for adoption to the summit, and that is the heads of states. So at least now the protocol has been, from February, has been endorsed by the policy organ, which comprises the Committee of Ambassadors. Last week, let's move to the next slide. We organized a sectoral meeting for the sectoral ministerial meeting for the ministers responsible for livestock and the pastoral development. These ministers are the ones who will be responsible for oversight of the implementation and the monitoring of this protocol in the region. So given that they are the ones responsible on the issues of livestock and pastoral development in the region, they have been mandated by the protocol under the protocol's Article 25 to implement and oversight the activities of the protocol. Therefore, we held a meeting, a sectoral meeting, which now by that meeting, we presented the roadmap for implementation of the protocol. And the good news is that this roadmap was discussed by the experts and it was endorsed last week. So right now, as we speak, we have both the protocol endorsed and the roadmap endorsed, including the transhumance certificate that will be working I would be mentioning that the protocol borrows a lot. It is actually inched on the continental pastoral policy framework. It borrows a lot from what is advocated. It comes in to implement the objectives of the AU policy framework within the REC. And that is especially on the securing, protecting the lives and livelihoods and rights of pastoral people. So looking at now the implementation roadmap, let's move to the next slide. The implementation roadmap has 5 steps. The first step which we are looking at is once this protocol is signed, we anticipate that within a few months, probably early next year, we are going to have the Council of Ministers convening a meeting and then having it signed. Once this is signed, then we will engage a full gear into the popularization and domestication, ratification processes with the member states. And then after that, we engage into a lot of activities to deal with the strengthening of the governance within the border governance for the cross-border clusters. Now, IGAD protocol is different in terms of implementation from probably our colleagues in ECOWAS, in that we have mobility of livestock from Mauritania coming down into all the way spanning through the member states, as we learned when we went to Burkina Faso, even to Chad. But for us, a majority of our pastoral communities are moving in cluster areas. We call them clusters because we do not have cases where pastoralists are having their livestock move from a place like Somalia to Kenya to Uganda to South Sudan. No, but we have pastoralists within Kenya, South Sudan, and Somalia within a certain cluster of borders. They are moving across from Somalia to Kenya and back, and also from Ethiopia. They are in cluster formats. So that's what we engage into, strengthening those border areas, ensuring that we have inspection areas for the veterinary services. And then the third one will be mapping and designating what we would call the cross-border corridors or the transhumance corridors and the resources. And then the fourth step is where we anticipate to have a lot of investments in pastoral areas and working with partners to have complementary livelihood resources, especially along those transhumance corridors and also those grazing zones. And lastly is monitoring of the cross-border mobility, engaging the community, deepening community engagement, sensitization, and also regular reporting to member states on the status of implementation. Lastly, let's move to what is next now. What do we anticipate after this? Next slide, which I think is the final one. We anticipate that the next steps include signing. We've done a lot of work. We have actually completed, I would say, the 90% in terms of having the protocol adopted and being able to be implemented. So the only remaining part is what we call in the signing and adoption. And this, since we have it from the Committee of Ambassadors, it will be now taken to the Council of Ministers as part of the agenda when we'll be meeting next, and it will be signed and it will be sent to the IGAD summit. Thereafter, we engaged into process of domestication, ratification and domestication, and then full implementation. Actually, the domestication is part of the implementation process. As we speak as of now, from what you can see in the picture on the right side, it's a report. We have already carried out a legal, policy, and institutional framework assessment to look at what exists in those pastoral areas, what are the cross-border institutions that can house this implementation of this transhumance protocol, and what we need to do thereafter. So we have carried out assessment in all those 7 member states, and I am sure that soon when we embark into full implementation, this is what we're going to use to make sure that we strengthen the existing institutions, we establish those which are not available, and we proceed to have the protocol working. Thank you, and we look forward to discussing more during the question and answer session. We can move to the next, and I think that's all.
All right.
Over to you, Kubi.
Thank you so much, Japhet. I think it was very impressive also the entire process from the consultations up to also the fact-finding mission to Burkina and the exchanges you had also with West Africa to come to the Transhumance protocol at IGAT level. Now, normally we were supposed to have as a next speaker Dr. Soule from ECOWAS, but he's not in the room right now. So I suggest we go straight to our next and final speaker, which is Michael Ocheng Odiambo. Michael has been working closely with CELAP in the past few years, and he's currently a director of People, Land and Rural Development, and he's based in Kenya. Michael is an expert in the field of pastoralist policies, and he will present his insights regarding these different policy frameworks, so from an external and expert point of view. So Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And thanks particularly to Mamadou and Japhet for their presentations on the two frameworks, the AU Pastoral Policy Framework and the IGAD Protocol on Transhumance. I'd like to say that it is very encouraging to see. Okay, all right. I've been asked to start my video, so I'll do that. But I'm talking from the roadside somewhere in the middle of the country, so you may or may not be able to get this as clearly. But I wanted to say that it is very encouraging to see that pastoralism is become a focus of policy attention within the AU and the REX. Those who have been engaging with the work around pastoralism and pastoral rights will be aware that up to the end of the towards the end of the last century, pastoralism was either totally ignored in policies, or whenever policies engaged with the pastoralism, it was more like policy suppression rather than policy enablement. I think the AU's pastoral policy framework did open up a new chapter in with regards to enabling policies for pastoralism and for securing pastoralist livelihoods, and this is really encouraging. Nevertheless, I think there are clearly challenges in terms of the apparent gap between the very positive statements one sees in the policies and even in the protocols, and the reality on the ground, which is that pastoralists still face immense challenges, generally, but even more specifically with regards to mobility. I would like to just highlight a few of these challenges because I think that's the feedback that our colleagues need to get, and also hope that together we can then discuss how can we ensure that these positive policy developments in favor of pastoralism do translate into benefits for pastoralists on the ground. I think the first thing that concerns me is the level of participation by pastoralists themselves and pastoralist institutions in the design and implementation of these very positive policies. With the AU Pastoral Policy Framework, I think there was a very significant effort to try and engage particularly civil society. I regret to say that with the protocol, with the IGAD protocol, seeing the roadmap that Japhet just shared with us, one is struck by how state-centric and how technocratic that roadmap is. We have had technical, national technical consultations. We are having meetings of ministers. I did not see any reference to civil society engaging with this process. And I know, because I work with civil society, that we have had very a lot of difficulties in engaging with this process within IGAD, and even in just getting access to the different drafts that have been part of the negotiation. And that is a problem, because it is very difficult for communities who are the direct beneficiaries of these policies to own these policies and to be able to make demands on the duty bearers to deliver on what the policies say if they are not involved in the design of the policies and own the process. The product cannot be owned if we are not part of the process. And I think the challenge for us is, how do we ensure that civil society organizations, pastoralist civil society organizations, and other interested civil society groups and pastoralist traditional leadership are actively engaged in the design and ultimately the implementation of these policies. I think the second problem, which I would really like to hear Mamadou and Japheth speak to, is the issue of political will to actually implement these policies. Usually we assume the existence of political will when a process like this takes place and the document is produced. But we have seen that even this, the policy framework at the regional level and the protocol at IGAD level will depend ultimately on the action at the national level by governments. How do we ensure that the political will that is clearly demonstrated by this process going on will subsist to the stage of implementation? I think in that connection, it's also important to ask, and this I think is specific to Japheth, what is the planning within IGAD that will ensure that once the policy, the protocol has gone through the entire process of adoption, that it will actually get domesticated at national level and translated into, where necessary, local laws and bylaws to ensure that the benefits accrue to pastoralists. When one looks at, for instance, what's happened in the AU with the AU land framework and guidelines on land policy, there's a very clear roadmap and institutional arrangement for ensuring that it is followed up into domestication. I'm not aware myself of such a clear follow-up mechanism for the pastoralist policy at the AU level, and would also like to hear from Japheth what is the plan with regards to at the IGAD level with regards to the protocol. This political will is important because we see that in spite of very enabling framework policy statements, at the national level, you still have competing policy imperatives that come from, say, agriculture, commercialization and industrialization of the agricultural sector, from extractives, mega projects in pastoralist areas, which negate all the benefits that appear to be indicated in these policy documents. I think Mamadou did mention that at the national level, policies don't seem to speak to each other, and we end up with conflicting policies. And I think at the end of the day, pastoralists will only benefit from policies when they actually get implemented. For them to get implemented, the prioritization of pastoralist interests must be reconciled with the priorities given to other policy imperatives, especially those related to rural development, infrastructure development, extractives, mining, oil exploration, and so on. So the question then, which I want to end up with is, what is the role, what is it that we can do collectively within the framework of CELEP as people who are in this engagement? What is it that we can do to ensure that these signals of positive developments that are coming from policies and protocols actually translate into benefits at the local level for pastoralists? I think I will stop there, and I am hoping that we, in our discussions, will be able to bring out even more feedback from our colleagues in AU and REX to ensure that benefits are generated from these positive developments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Michael. Meanwhile, I got the information that there's some issues regarding the interpretation to French. So I'll try to summarize very briefly what was said in French. Donc, Michael, il a rebondi un peu sur ce qu'ont dit Japhet et Mamadou. Donc, tout d'abord, en fait, il a souligné l'importance d'impliquer aussi les organisations de la société civile pastorale et il a remis justement en question l'implication de la société civile pastorale dans la mise en œuvre du protocole au niveau d'IGAT. Il a stipulé qu'au niveau du framework, au niveau de l'Union africaine, ça a bien été fait. Donc, la société civile pastorale a bien été impliquée. Il a aussi souligné l'importance d'impliquer la société civile pastorale dans la mise en œuvre des politiques. Et le deuxième problème qu'il a abordé, c'est qu'il faut aussi avoir une certaine volonté politique pour la mise en œuvre de ces politiques qui existent donc au niveau régional et au niveau continental, parce que l'implémentation de ces politiques est très importante et que souvent il y a des intérêts divergents entre les différents acteurs concernés. Notamment, il y a aussi une compétition foncière justement au niveau des zones pastorales, donc au niveau de l'exploitation minière, mais aussi l'exploitation agricole, etc. Et finalement, en fait, Michael, il a conclu en disant que, et en posant la question, qu'est-ce que nous, en tant qu'acteurs de la société civile, en tant qu'acteurs qui appuient donc et qui veulent donc appuyer une certaine reconnaissance de l'importance et de la valeur du pastoralisme et donc un cadre politique qui soit favorable à ça. Qu'est-ce que nous, on peut faire pour que ces changements qui sont très positifs, que
check on your volume, Kool.
Pardon. Que ces cadres politiques qui existent soient vraiment adaptés aux besoins des communautés pastorales. Voilà. Donc là, un résumé très court en français. So I will continue in English now. I will, since the translation is not working, I will try to make small summaries in French from time to time. I think Michael already gave some interesting reactions to what Japhet and Mamadou mentioned regarding the AU framework and the IGAD Transhumance protocol. So Japhet and Mamadou, would you already like to react right now on the different issues that Michael highlighted? Or would you like to wait? Yes.
Okay.
Please. All right.
Okay, can I? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Who would like to start, Japhet or Mamadou?
Okay, I'm ready to intervene and if it okay. So,
okay, please. So Mamadou, you can go first, and then Japhet. Okay, thank you.
D'accord. Donc, je vais aller en français aussi, ou bien je m'en vais en anglais. Comme vous avez parlé de problèmes d'interprétation, je ne sais pas qu'est-ce qu'il faut que je fasse.
Is the interpretation problem already taken care of? Is there a translation now? I think the translation, je pense qu'il y a toujours des problèmes de traduction, Mamadou.
Okay. So okay. So go in English, huh?
Okay. I think that's better. Afterwards, perhaps you could give like a small summary also in French of what you said.
Right. So
right, thank you.
I want to thank Michael for those insightful comment on both presentation, the AU framework and the IGAD protocol process as well. So regarding the level of participation of the pastoral community themselves to inform the policy. Okay, I just want to mention there that at the African Union level, we have put in place what we call the support to the non-state actors to the process of the Malabo, what we call the Malabo process in general, including all the thematic related to agriculture. When we talk about agriculture, we talk about also livestock, including pastoralism. So this support to the non-state actors target basically, the farmer organization and also the pastoralist association. So I think a lot of work has been done since then to make sure that most of the process related to policy formulation. We make sure that those pastoral associations and farmer organizations are really coming on board. We get to the point at some time where we had to associate, to put together all the stakeholders involved in rural development, including farmer organization, pastoral association, this range of stakeholder, working together. So I think this is at African Union level, we really make sure that those stakeholders are really talking each other and to inform the policy. On the political will to implement the instrument, I think this is where we really need to maybe push, to push the issues and make sure that but at African Union, we have the document, and at some point, to give you an example, when we draft the implementation plan of the framework, we decided at some point to have what we call the continental code for the pastoralism. When we talk about the code, it's also involved those legislation at the national level. But as you know, the legislation are different from country to country. So being able to put in place a continental code to promote the pastoralist practice, it has been very challenging for us. So at some point, what we decided to do, we prepared what we call the guidelines to secure the pastoralism, in terms of the conflict resolution and the conflict prevention in the continent. And, it's a legal document where it gives kind of, the guidelines for the country themselves to make sure that those guidelines are incorporated in the national code. Like I said, some countries have already prepared the code, which are, very interesting, but many countries still lagging behind in terms of coming up with those legal documents. So, so this is what I can say regarding this, the gap between the policies and the reality on the ground. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Mamadou. Just so everyone's informed, the translation seems to be working again. So for those who prefer to follow in French, you can go back to French. Japhet, would you also like to react to Michael's intervention?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, for your concerns and very well articulated issues. I see two major concerns you posted for us as IGAD. First of all, you are concerned about the engagement of CSOs in the development of the protocol and moving forward. And I'm surprised that you have not been in the know of how we carried. When I was talking about national consultation meetings, these are not national consultation meetings only for the state officers. It includes state and non-state officers, for example. And also we brought on board the networks that are working with in pastoral areas. For example, we involved the Eastern and South African, the ESPN, the Eastern and South African Pastoralist Network. We also worked with the COPAXO, that is for Uganda. We worked with the NIALCO. NIALCO is a Northeastern African Livestock Council, and what it works for is to help. It's a regional traders association, those who trade in issues of livestock, trading livestock in and outside this region, even to the GCC countries. We had networks in the consultation meetings of pastoralist communities. We also involved the elders. We actually, when we went to national meetings, if I can mention a few of them, in Djibouti, we had the Djibouti Agro-Pastoralist Association. In Ethiopia, we had the SNNPR, which is a Pastoralist Affairs Bureau, even a Oromia Pastoralist Association. The process was so consultative and, what I would call participatory, in the sense that we also included the pastoral elders in these meetings. I am the one who was in charge of organizing those meetings. We ensured that we have participation of grassroots pastoral elders and leaders. Even in Kenya, where my friend comes from, we had people including the SACCO Trust, Rural Trust, which is an association supporting pastoralists in the region of SACCO. And therefore, I would say that the consultation were heavily done at that level. And we have involved the civil societies, including and especially looking at the networks of pastoral associations. Now, I would also mention that at this level of developing the protocol, we involve the civil societies and the leaders, the community leaders at the technical level when we're coming up with the document to ensure the interests are factored into the document. When we come into the process of negotiations, we're looking at the legal processes, and at that level is where we are buying the political goodwill of the member states. And so we engage the Attorney General's office, the state officers now, to push the agenda that we have received from the stakeholders and make sure that it is put in the language that is acceptable. And so the voices of pastoralists have been factored into this protocol. That is why we actually had learning missions even outside this region. And the process was to ensure that we are not going to repeat mistakes that probably happened in other regions. I would want to mention on the second part, which you're saying, how would we domesticate this? How is domestication going to be done? What have we done at the national level? You see, the process of coming up with the regional instruments, first of all, when we have the regional instrument, after the signatories, which is the biggest hassle, having the negotiation discussions with the member states to ensure that the agenda of the grassroots people is pushed and signed by the member states. Once that is done, and we reserve the signatories by the Council of Ministers, now we engage ourselves into full consultations and the full swing discussions with the community members. The protocol will be implemented at the community level. So that is why we are talking about, at the first stage, coming up with pastoral codes or legislations in this region, which we actually don't have. Only Uganda has a draft, and no other country here has a livestock pastoral legislation. It is implied in the livestock policy documents, you see, and therefore, we also going to have the bilateral agreements to implement this, which are going to be done within the community leadership and the local government cross-border levels. So really, the process of domestication is a whole process that will involve all the members and the stakeholders that are concerned. And I think you should not have a fear on that. We will involve all the relevant stakeholders. We want you to stay on board with us. And even now, as we are talking, we have discussed with the AFSA. AFSA is the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. They have come on board to simplify, to have the protocol done in a more community-friendly pamphlet, to do a friendly document that can be read by the communities to help in sensitization. We are already preparing ourselves for a full throttle implementation process so that at least we will now work with the community level civil society organizations in rolling out the protocol implementation. And I hope that I'm answering your question. Thank you. Unless I missed something. Over to you, Kun.
Thank you so much, Japhet. I think that was a very, very conclusive answer. Perhaps, Michael, you can give a reaction, but first, it might be good also to open the floor to others. So please, if you have any questions or remarks for our different speakers, right now would be a good time to ask them. I see that there's a question in the chat box from Jacob Wako. Would you like to ask it orally, Jacob, or would you like me to read the question? Either way is fine. If you would like to ask it live, just please put on your camera and you can just unmute yourself and then just ask your question. Either way.
Hello, thank you. My name is Jacob from Kenya. I've just highlighted my concerns. Kindly go ahead and read for me.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jacob. So please go on mute again. So Jacob says, and I quote, "The heartbeat of pastoralism is mobility across rangelands against a background of climate variability. What policy exciting to safeguard them? What is the place of indigenous knowledge in the pastoralist policy frameworks? And what is the budget allocation for livestock across African countries? What about livestock market and financial linkage for livestock? And where are we with ending drought emergency framework?" So I think the first question regarding indigenous knowledge is a question for both Jafet and Mamadou. Then regarding budget allocation, I don't know, Mamadou, perhaps you have some information on that. And then about livestock market and financial linkage, to me, it's not really clear what you mean by that. And then there's also a question about ending drought emergency framework. Perhaps I'll just go through the chat for another question. So there's another question about the exposure visit from IGAD to ECOWAS regarding implementation challenges on the Transhumance protocol. What could be drawn from these experiences? So I think that's a question also for Jafet. I don't see any other questions at this point. So, sorry, is there someone who would like to ask a question?
The hand of Nyangorio Henjo is up.
Okay. Please, if you would like to speak, best is if you turn on your video and then unmute yourself, and then you can speak freely.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, thanks, Kun. And a very interesting discussion. I was actually just trying to type it on the chat. What I wanted to know is just listening from the policies, they are quite interesting. They seem to really focus on how to support and protect pastoralism. I'm just wondering how they are addressing the threats that pastoralism is currently facing, threats related to change in land use, specifically around drylands farming, issues of extractives, issues of settlement. I don't know if there's any particular focus or protocols that address those particular challenges or threats. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nyangori. I don't know, Jafet and Mamadou, would you like to start answering the questions now, or should we take some more, which give you some more time to prepare your answers, or do you already want to go at it right now?
I think you can go ahead and try to address some of those concerns that I just raised.
Please go ahead.
Okay, so for the first intervention, I guess captured three concerns. The first one being the mobility, which is just the characteristic of the pastoralist, and also the use of indigenous knowledge in promoting pastoralism in Africa. I think in the AU framework, I couldn't really go through all the whole aspect of the whole thematic that has been identified in the framework, but the issues of mobility and also the issues of using the indigenous knowledge are really well captured in the document as the guidelines. But as we have been talking, the issue is now how we are going to implement. We implement all the aspects that have been. This is another issue. Otherwise, the document clearly identify and stress on the characteristic of the pastoralism being the activity where people are asked to move from place to place, both within the country and also the border. This is very well captured, and now it's now the issue is how to implement those things through the national legislation and also the regional agreement among the countries. is the indigenous knowledge. We know that pastoralists are basically based on traditional practices. So we really need to promote those indigenous knowledge and make sure that the pastoralists do their activity based on those. Now, regarding the drought emergency strategy, I think the African Union is leading this initiative of putting in place this drought strategy in collaboration with the UNCCD. I think the drafts have been already discussed at some level, and I think they're going to finalize this draft, the emergency strategy. If but I can maybe check. But otherwise, I know that it's something that is already in the process of being finalized. Regarding the market and the financing aspect of the pastoralist, I think we at African Union level, we have our office with what we call the AU-IBA, which is based in Nairobi even. I think they are fully involved in these issues of marketing, financial aspect of the of the pastoralism. I think they have doing some quite good job on this aspect. Now, regarding the second intervention in the change of land use, again, at African Union, we have developed what we call the Land Policy Initiative, where it also look at all aspects of the land use in Africa, including the new emerging issues like mining, land grabbing from the from the external people. I think it's very clear, including the right of practicing pastoralism on the continent. So this land initiative, the land policy, this initiative is really very holistic, and it got time to really look at all the aspects that we just mentioned here, including the challenges and how we're going to overcome those challenges. Yeah, back to you, moderator.
Thank you, Mamadou. I think you already answered a lot of questions. There was also a particular question for Japhet on the visit, the exposure visit, and that was done to the ECOWAS region to learn from their experience in putting together the certificate on international transhumance and etc. Would you like to respond to that question, Japhet?
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. First of all, let me say that our region is as enormous, resources, and it's important to note that we have we have come up with methods. When you're talking about the market, IGAD is working with the NIALCO. NIALCO is a network of traders in livestock issues or livestock trade. And therefore, we are working with them to ensure that they can access the market in the Middle East, in the regions around, especially the MENA. In fact, the region has rich livestock resources. Annually and averagely in the region, we export over 12 million live animals. And that is over 41 metric ton of meat. And trade is benefiting more than close to 2 million people in the region. And therefore, there's high demand of the livestock product in the MENA region, that is the Middle East and North Africa region, from this corner of Africa. And we still have more other resources, including the abundant and wood forest products like resins and gums. And so we are working with people like NIALCO, establishing policies on how to harness the wood products. And so this is about marketing. ICPOD came into play so that it can promote the livelihoods and the opportunities for the pastoral communities. And so we in discussions with these other regions to ensure also there is good market for livestock products. In terms of ending emergencies, the IGAD came up with, the protocol is going to work around addressing the issues of of drought emergencies. You remember sometimes those who come from this region, sometimes in 2012, even back in 2009, there were those very adverse droughts through which many livestock died, and we lost a lot of income in this region. And therefore, when we have the mobility across an access of, pasture in other regions or in other countries, we are promoting the livestock survival. For example, currently in Uganda, the livestock heads of cattle from Kenya alone is more than 1 million, over 700,000 from Turkana and over 300,000 from the West Pokot. And you see, if we can have that kind of interdependency between the member states and communities entrenched into this, then that is a process of also addressing the drought emergencies. There's a regional policy on ending drought emergency, which is being implemented through what we call IDC, IGAD Drought Response Initiative. And so that's a whole program that is already being rolled out. And then lastly, somebody was asking about the lessons from ECOWAS. We mentioned that we visited the region further. We also visited, had meetings with the different stakeholders. And then we realized because of the many issues that are happening there, there should be gradual reduction in conflict as both crop farmers and livestock keepers are at least working well within the protocol, okay? But also we learned there was a lot of encroachment of the livestock corridors, those transhumance corridors in the region. There was a lot of encroachment into those lands and reliance on the three-tier system of conflict resolution, which is the traditional mechanism, the municipal mechanism, and judicial orders, which I think those are some of the things we were borrowing. There was some level of insurgency and insecurity in the region that has disrupted the normal migration pattern for livestock keepers. And therefore, this working in terms of promoting the protocol mobility has to work together with our sister institutions like C1, which looks at the conflict early warning and response mechanisms and ensuring there's a coexistence between these communities. So really, we would say that essential services are in place along the livestock corridors, including the health, fodder, and the water in those regions. And that is what we are promoting in this region as well. So those are just to mention in summary some of the things that we were able to identify that could be carried on and that we need to know how to handle in our region. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Japhet. I see a lot of questions also coming up in the chat box. Before going into them, I see that there are also 2 hands raised of people who would like to intervene. So one of them is from Tezera, from Pastoralist Forum Ethiopia. Tezera, would you like to get, to be given the floor and to make a speech? If so, please put on your camera so we can see you and switch on your mic. Tezera? No.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly. Hi, Tezera.
I'm good. Hi, everybody. Just I would like to add 2 more points on. Okay. Can you let me show myself? The video is really important. Great. Just we do have this policy. Pastoralist policy and strategy document, which is already enacted by councils of ministers in Ethiopia. This has considered elements of African Union policy framework, which is really interesting, so that this policy has addressed the mobile pastoralist production system. This is the first in its kind, just for the last 5 decades. So this is a very good advancement in Ethiopia. What's remaining is actually translate into the regional context. The regions, the pastoral regions should adopt or just customized to their own conditions. So that this is a very good advancement in terms of Ethiopia. The second advancement is about a special guideline for voters. That means, just we are planning our sixth election very in a few months' time, so that pastoralists are considered as a special social groups that need special voters guideline. That means the mobile type of guidelines, and which is really very friendly to the pastoralists. This is under discussion, so that this is a very good advancement also in terms of the political representation or just in the political process in the country. So that this is what I would like to add. And my only question, which is I've already put in the chat box, is how African Union or IGAD really consider pastoralism for the coming 20 or 25 years. Just we'll see, just the broad roadmap, how they are going to translate or address pastoral issues in the country. Otherwise, if you are talking about 3 to 5 years every time, this should be the translation for the long or the broad roadmap regarding pastoralism in Eastern Africa and also in the Western Africa. This is what I would like to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tazira. I think that's a very interesting question. How what is the future of pastoralism in 20 to 30 years, and how is that perceived actually by the African Union and by IGAD? Meanwhile, I've also been going a bit through the chat, and I saw some other questions coming up. So one question was also related to the issue of small arms and insecurity and the cross-border issue around that. How is this taken into account in the different policy frameworks? So I think that's also a question for both speakers, the whole security aspect, which was also highlighted, I think, in particular in the presentation made by Mamadou. There was also a question about the consultation of CSOs. I think that's more a question for Jafet regarding the ASL stakeholder forum. What is the positioning? Were they also consulted? What is the idea about this stakeholder forum? And then there was also a particular question regarding the role of private investment in pastoralist areas. Is that something that is also taken into account on the AU framework? Private investment in these areas, and same question for IGAD and the Transhumance Protocol. Is that also something that's being included in these documents, or is there a separate process ongoing to facilitate private investment in pastoralist areas? So these are another series of questions for Jafet and Mamadou. I don't know, Jafet or Mamadou, who would like to answer first, or Michael, if you also have a reflection to share on what is going on, please. Who would like to go first?
Okay, I think I can go first if it's acceptable.
Please go ahead, Mamadou.
All right. So let me reflect on the comment from Mr. Tezera from Ethiopia, and it just put on the table a straightforward question on how the AUC is seeing the pastoralism in the next 20 or 25 years. I think this is a very good question, because the practice of the pastoralists right now is seen by many people as something that is creating lot of issues, mainly the issues of when we talk about the mobility of the pastoralist people moving with the animal from place to place. It's ending up with many conflict, mostly in the Sahel region here. So one of the key aspects on which the African Union is really putting the emphasis is how we prevent the conflict between the farmers in general and the pastoralists in Africa. And for this, the African Union has put in place a kind of the task team to work on the nexus between all those stakeholders. So we already prepared and validate a very good document on the guidelines, which is going to be popularized at the country level. And those guidelines clearly, when it's really applied, will contribute really to minimize the conflict between the stakeholders in the pastoral area, mostly the farmers and the pastoral. So this is one of the points that really putting a lot of effort on that right now. Security, to allow mobility and prevent the conflict among pastoral communities and the farmers. And we have already put in place what a kind of platform, where the two group of people, dialogue. They have to dialogue most of the time to make sure that they can really come up to the agreement for the two group of people to really practice farming and also practice the pastoralism. This is something that is ongoing activity that African Union is doing. The other issue is also to make sure that the pastoral can live, can get, the livelihood, from the pastoralism practices. How to increase the income, from the pastoral activity, and many projects have been designed, and like I said, our office AU-IBA are really focusing on those aspects of making sure that the pastoral, are really getting something from the activity right now. And on the private investment on pastoral issues, the framework already, I said, is really as very elaborate on those issues. But I said, it's now a matter of implementation, how we are going to implement, looking at the national, policies, and those are the issues that need to be discussed. And I think we will really have to move forward on those aspects. Thank you, moderator. Back to you.
Thank you, Mamadou. There were also some other questions. I think you already answered some of them on the issue of small arms and insecurity and cross borders. But perhaps Jafet, you also have an opinion on this, and then also the question regarding the ASAL stakeholder forum. Yeah, perhaps could you highlight a bit your opinion on that? Thank you.
I think in terms of considerations for us, our stakeholders, in the development of the protocol, I think I mentioned and I answered, yes, we did a lot of consultations and discussions. By the way, the discussions on the pastoral framework or legal framework in the region did not just start with the IGAD consultations. I do remember even sometimes early in 2010, when there were discussions between a group called itself SIM, Security and Mobility Partnership, of some UN agencies in this region. And they moved across within the 4 member states of IGAD to look at the concerns of the pastoral issues and livelihoods and challenges. And that's where they came up with recommendations also on humanitarian support, pastoral needs and mobility rights, development, and so on and so forth. And so I would say that it's a journey which has come from a far distance. In terms of talking in terms of small arms and security, we have had consultations. It's unfortunate that some of our member states have not disarmed fully the pastoral communities in the border regions. But in discussions and in all the meetings we've had, we take cognizance this region has several frameworks. One, it does have the Nairobi Protocol on the prevention and control and reduction of illicit arms and the light weapons in the Great Lake region. And that itself has most of the IGAD member states are part of that protocol. There's also the protocol, which is normally called Mifugo Protocol, but the full name is the Protocol on the Prevention, Combating, and Eradication of Cattle Rustling in the Eastern African region, and that was done in 2008. These are frameworks which exist, but in terms of implementation, and we even have offices that are running them. The Mifugo Protocol on Cattle Rustling is housed within the YAP of the police Interpol. The Great Lakes Small Arms and Light Weapons Protocol is housed within a Nairobi office here and works in the region. We've been involved in them and discussions, and we hope that the views they brought into the development of this overarching framework, in terms of implementation, then it looks into considerations of issues of conflict reduction, issues of the member states taking also responsibility in security, in securing and disarming. We congratulate a country like Uganda, even though there are a lot of issues raised in terms of how they did disarmament. But in any case, today, if you go to the pastoral region of Karamoja, the communities are disarmed, and then the country itself, the state has sent, the government has sent what we call the armies to protect their pastoralists from, being invaded by other pastoral armed people from other communities. And therefore, I think we need to rethink as countries our interventions and our also investments in these regions. I don't know whether any other question. I'll still be responding as we continue.
No, thank you so much, Japhet. I think that was a very complete reply to the question, and thank you also for for focusing on that. I see a lot of other questions are still popping up also in the chat box. We are actually going over time because we're already 10 minutes late. However, I saw one question which was also actually asked by Michael, and which is very important, I think, also for the work for CELAP, and which is a question to both you, Mamadou and Japhet. We as actors working with and for pastoralist communities in Eastern Africa and Western Africa and elsewhere, what can we do actually to make sure that these positive policy evolutions that are actually taking place with the policy framework and the Transhumance protocol and all the other policies that were discussed here today, what can we do actually as actors, as NGOs and as CSOs and etc., to make sure that these actually translate in improved livelihoods and living conditions for pastoralists on the ground? Perhaps we can actually, this answer can actually be the closure also of the webinar. So please, Mamadou and Japhet, what would be your ideas on that? What can we do? I don't know who would like to go first. Mamadou?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, I think the perspective that we're seeing from the discussion, the key issues for us is really to strengthen the domestication of those policies at the national level. Because we know the pastoral, firstly, is like at the community level that we need to focus. So for us is to really make sure that the policy document that has been drafted either at the continental level or regional level, be really domesticated at the national and also at the community. This is very important because at the end of the day, this is something that has to be really implemented on the ground. So we need to make sure that those, the national investment plan, because most of the countries have what they call the national investment plan, where all the thematics related to rural livelihood are captured there. This is where the budget are allocated and so on and so forth. So we really need to domesticate those policy prepared at the continental and the regional level to be reflected on those national plan. This is the first thing that I see, and I think it's very crucial that we work together on that. And the second one is maybe we need also to strengthen the collaboration among the institutions working on pastoralism, because I can see many organizations, many institutions, having a portfolio or the specific project or program, which aim to promote the pastoralism, but I can see kind of lack of collaboration or coordination. We can also make sure that all those organizations come together and bring on the table a specific roadmap where they can see each other and move forward for the better practice of the pastoralism on the continent. Back to you.
Thank you, Mamadou. Jafet, what would your recommendation be in light of the question that I asked before? What can we do as CSOs and organizations that are supporting pastoralists and pastoralism?
Thank you, Kun. I think number one, we need to increase our advocacies, especially with the government institutions. Sometimes it sounds like we're getting fatigued, but I want to encourage all of us to keep on in the advocacy work. You realize that like the member state institutions like IGAD, even if we find there are some areas we want to raise a lot of advocacy against what the states are doing, we cannot rely on the CSOs. You have a very pertinent role to play. And we want to think that, especially when we are dealing with, somebody's talking. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I muted him.
So especially when we are dealing with the domestication of these protocols, we want the CSOs because to understand the benefit of the protocols to the community themselves they are serving, and then they can become an advocacy agent and for these instruments we're talking about, so that it's not just seen as a state-organized institutions. And you see, we can also popularize these protocols and the frameworks at the local level ground as they're implementing, working together in partnerships with the policy institutions like IGAD. We want to encourage the CSOs to work with us in terms of implementing these protocols and picking them up for advocacies on ground. You can imagine now the pastoral communities who have been living between the member states, the border areas. Now they are being told you shall be using the ITs, the Transhumance certificates to cross. That needs a lot of advocacy and education to them to understand the benefit of it. It will first be faced with a lot of opposition. And we see the work of the CSOs and people working on ground to play a lot of role in this aspect. The other thing I said is advocacy in terms of nationalization and the domestication of the documents, that we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there's a clear recommendation also from both of you to what we can do, which I'm sure we'll be discussing more, especially also within CELAP, because we will have our annual general meeting in the coming days. There's also an important meeting coming up of the Pastoralist Knowledge Hub at FAO, where I think this discussion will feed into as well. So thank you very much. Then I would like to conclude the webinar and thank everyone for joining, especially Mamadou and Jafet and Michael. I think your participation has been vital, and thank you so much for supporting us in organizing that. And I will give the final word to Mary to make the concluding remarks on behalf of SNV and the Voice for Change Partnership, who was kind enough to host today's webinar. Just to mention as well that there's another webinar planned. So as this one is part of the series, which will be on food security and nutrition, and which will be hosted by Concern on the 9th of December. More information will follow on the CELAP website, www.celap.info. Mary, the floor is yours for the concluding remarks.
Thanks, Kun, for giving us the opportunity to host this event. First of all, thank you, Mamadou and Japheth, for demystifying issues related to the pastoralism protocols in East and Western Africa, and for showing us the opportunity where we can participate in the respective countries. So I realize that there is still a lot of work to do. So for civil society organizations participating in this process, please feel free to pick up on the opportunities that has been shared to us that we can be able to pick on. We'll be able to share the presentations from this sharing today with everyone. Thank you very much, and thank you all for creating time to join. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye.